who's going to step up, who is going to take on a leadership and a role like that with this club to just own it. I think that there are some prospects. I could see Sam Coffey stepping into a much more of a leadership role this year, but she's also, right, reports of leaving. Who knows if that's going to happen? Yeah. We are doing team by team, going through everything that needs to happen. We've worked our way from the bottom of the standings last year to the top. Right now, we get to talk about the Portland Thorns. They finished in 6th place in 2024 at the end of the campaign. They did make it to the postseason. They had 34 points, 10 wins, 4 draws, 12 losses, and holy cow, buckle up. It was a roller coaster of a season for Thorns. They didn't get their first win in 2024 until their 5th match. It was against the Houston Dash, and that was already after a coaching change. Interim Rob Gale had come in, but then they ended up going on this great stretch of winning 7 of their next 8 games. They closed out the season losing 7 of their 10 games. So it was really down, up, down again for Portland. They were knocked out in the playoffs of quarterfinals by Gotham FC. And they said goodbye to a lot of players, big players at the end of the year. Christine Sinclair, Becky Sauerbrunn. There was a lot of change that came at the end of 2024 for Portland due to some retirings. Then some players announced that they're just leaving the club. Defender Megan Klingenberg, the longtime Thorn, departed, and also defender Kelly Hubley, not due to retirement, just on their way out. They have made some signings in this offseason, bringing in some players, including Venezuelan international forward Dana Castellanos, free agent defender Sam Hyatt, and Brazilian center back Vianney. They also re-signed a couple players, Bella Bigsby, Sophie Hurst, Melly McKenzie, and then signed some rookies as well out of UCLA defender Jaden Perry and U20 U.S. Youth International forward Pietra Torden out of Princeton. There's been a lot of changes happening at Portland and everything that has come, including we got a new name, guys. Write it down. Congratulations to forward Sophia Smith. She's now Sophia Wilson. Let's see how many times we screwed that up. But
I did that because my brain just went, don't say Sophia Smith. Don't say Sophia Smith.
It's tough. It's tough. When you think back to, Christine, 2024 with Portland and the roller coaster of a season, what is the best way for them to find some stability heading into 2025?
They had really a lot of problems just like getting shots off, but also kind of locking up in the midfield where when you did have a healthy Sophia Wilson, she was isolated. So that was one of their big challenges, that, and like they sort of fixed things as they went, but there wasn't any consistency. That was the other issue. And I know, having spoken to Rob Gale over the course of the season more than a few times, some of it was injury, some of it, international duty. He was trying to get his feet under him as first interim and then eventually like full-time coach. But I think that was a lot of their problems, is like you just saw balls die, like losing Coffey, key players that were like missing at really critical parts of the season. Just, they had a perfect storm in blips, and then they'd correct. You'd say, oh, I think we figured it out yet. They'd get wins where you did not expect them to win, but then the inverse was happening. So I think a little bit of leadership, a little bit more galvanizing of the team, but like also work in the midfield, getting shots off, being more clinical, were above and among their chief issues.
Sandra, when you think about the next step for Portland and some of the players that they've already brought in, right? Dana Castellanos, some of these young rookies, is this what is necessary for Portland? Any other acquisitions, whether it's free agents list? And they have some defensive holes that they need to fill, losing Klingenberg, Hubley, and Sauerbrunn. Personnel-wise, who do you want to see or could be a good fit at Portland?
I mean, they need work. Looking at their preseason roster, I would like to have seen some more defenders for them, but maybe that's what preseason is for. Maybe they're going to find their answers during this time and make some additional signings. But I don't think you can look at the 2024 season and say that it was one of success for the Thorns. It was strange. I mean, I remember when we had Megan Klingenberg on Attacking Third, and we had a great interview with her, and she mentioned that the season was just a weird season. First year that the league is an expanded playoff format, and when you think about it in that sense, that's how they got in. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how Rob Gale does with an entire season in front of him. Got brought into the interim role at one point and turned things around for like a 6-week stretch, and it was enough to give him full reign of the team, and then they floundered again. So it's almost like not only did he come in the second half of the season, but then he had a second half of the season that was split again because there were results and then there were no results. They struggled to pick up wins. Yeah. We saw it in the body language of the players on the pitch. I mean, Sam Coffey, Soph Wilson, at these moments, these are franchise players, I would argue, at this point for the Thorns, and not having a good time, right? And we said a lot on this show that if it didn't look good, probably didn't feel good, and if it didn't feel good, it wasn't good. And so I think those are huge holes. Hubley, Klingenberg, Sauerbrunn, who's going to step up? I think maybe they take a look at a player like Reina Reyes, and maybe she's someone that they continue to build with and around on that back line. Maybe they're going to hope that she takes another step in her development. But I think you also look at that back net and wonder where things are going to go there. Bella Bixby's working her way back from, missing out last season, with pregnancy. So I think there's still a lot of question marks for Portland in terms of who they're going to be in 2025. And I think that is the biggest question. And it's a question that largely lies with Rob Gale and how he's actually going to utilize an entire season in front of him.
I think that Rob's issues, though, too, Sandra, just to build off of that, were not just with what he needed to do tactically, with, getting his bearings about him in terms of just like being a coach without having to write, I'm not an assistant, I'm the guy they're looking to now, is that, Portland also had, and maybe this is now to be looked at as a luxury in sporting organizations, but NWSL specifically, is they had to deal with a bunch of front office issues too, with ownership. This sort of untenuous path that they had where, they did have people exit the organization at one point. Rob Gale had told us that, he was clipping his own film. Not all the teams in NWSL do have somebody devoted to being like their film assistant, but Portland did have that. So, he was also running that and clipping that on his own. The feeling that they were sort of second to their now, I guess, parents in terms of like focus on basketball rather than soccer, and them feeling like a priority. I think there were a lot of things that Thorns are working through or had been working through that I hope are resolved before they enter this season, where Rob Gale feels fully supported and they have everything at their disposal that they need to be successful.
My biggest concern for Portland this year is leadership and almost maturity, I want to say, because you lose so much when you retire players like Christine Sinclair and Becky Sauerbrunn, who have been the captains, the leaders, the stalwarts, the backbone of this Portland side for years. And you also have a head coach that is still trying to find his footing in a sense, or find his dominance in coaching in this league. Because of last season, I can't imagine his confidence is flying as high as it could be heading into the 2025 season. And you then lose the stability of players that have been through ups and downs and understand things. Even Megan Klingenberg, right? Like, she's been with the Thorns and NWSL and the club for so long. That leadership to me is an intangible that you don't get in no matter how many talented players you sign. And who's going to step up? Who is going to take on a leadership and a role like that with this club to just own it? I think that there are some prospects. I could see Sam Coffey stepping into a much more of a leadership role this year, but she's also, right, reports of leaving. Who knows if that's going to happen? Yeah. There's still a lot of question marks in terms of how they do on the pitch. A lot of it's going to fall to leadership and maturity and veteran ability of this team. But I'm excited to see the young players develop and grow in the NWSL. We got Peyton Linehan, who came in last year to the Thorns and made an immediate impact, scoring in her debut, but then had a little bit of a setback. How is she going to grow? I also think Raylan Turner could be a big asset to this forward group and moving forward, scoring goals. But one player that has been with the Thorns is still so young, crazy to think about, that I just am manifesting a huge year. Olivia Moultrie. This is her year. This is Moultrie's year to take the midfield, to take her game to the next level. She's got all the space. I'm talking roster space. I'm talking space on the pitch. I'm talking space in her mind to grow, to be the next player, to implement herself, not only as a stalwart in Portland's midfield, as someone who connects the back lines, who contributes going forward, who can create chances for herself, for others around her. It is Olivia Moultrie's year. I want so much for her, and that will then trickle down into the international game with the US. But for me, those are kind of the biggest areas I'm looking at: leadership, maturity, and then which of these young players is just going to take the game this year and say, it's mine, I own it.
Do you think it could be Moultrie, or is she still too young, do you think, to take up that mantle?
I don't know how much she'll be as a leader in terms of her play, but I've been waiting for her to crack through the surface in her play and what she does on the pitch. And it has to be this year. Otherwise, I think she needs to leave Portland.
I think I think that's a fair point. I do think that's a fair point, because I mean, when you look at her timeline with it, she's literally been affiliated with this franchise since she was 13. And
it sounds insane, but you remember how young she still is.
We're talking about a kid in academy systems at this point. But it's got to come from somewhere, and it's got to come from someone. And I think to a certain extent, I think some of the players that you rattled off, and for some folks are these younger players. But when you bring up a Coffey or a Soph Wilson in this case, they've also been with that franchise for a few years now, and these were members of a gold medal winning team. They've got experiences outside of club at this point that are very, very beneficial. But Sam Coffey and Morgan Weaver were at the media days, and they got that was absolutely a question mark. So you're hitting it right on the head, Lisa, because it's something that the players are already getting asked about. And Weaver and Coffey were both pretty vocal about the fact that that's got to come. They have to look within the locker room. That's got to come from within. It's got to kind of come organically. There's a bit of a alluding to like it could likely come from Coffey. Maybe it comes from someone in Jesse Fleming. But these are all things that we're going to see over the course of a regular season. Maybe like I said earlier, maybe they find those answers out of preseason. Maybe it's from a first-year Thorn, but from someone who has been in the league for a little while. I mean, they went out and they got Sam Hyatt. This is someone that I think, want to have be that type of starting role kind of defender on their back line. Maybe it comes from the back. So we'll see, but it's a huge question mark for them moving forward.
The biggest question mark of them all is the postseason position. Quickly, predictions for Portland Thorns ahead of anything that we've seen actually on the pitch this year. Do the Portland Thorns make the playoffs again in 2025 for what would be their 9th straight season? Christine? Yes, no, maybe so?
I think I think they'll hang on. I think that organizationally, that would be a failure if they don't make playoffs, but they need to do far better than they have this past season. If you want me to be positive, I say they've now had the time. Rob Gale has had adequate time to gather himself, the organization, figure out what players, because remember, he didn't have the luxury last season of selecting and figuring out a system, making sure they had adequate depth. Now, he's in the driver's seat. It's all on him. They have to do better. But yeah, I'd say they'll make playoffs.
Yeah, I would never bet against Soph Smith, and I'm not going to start betting against Soph Wilson. They're going to make the playoffs.
Sandra, you're the friggin' best. I love it. I am with you then on that one. Our poll on YouTube, they're with you as well. 45% say that they're going to make the playoffs. 37% say that they're not at all. 13% say that they'll make a deep playoff run, and 3% say they'll win the title.